Wow, those those breakout sessions were absolutely amazing and awesome. And I'm sure you're all thinking like, I wish I could have seen all three breakout sessions each time because I had to choose one and then I had to choose another one. I'm happy to share that in a short while you will get a email with video links to all six breakout presenters who did just an absolutely amazing job. When we have the voices of teacher leaders in equity in our breakout presentations, it's truly inspiring and powerful. We are now at the point for our closing keynote. Our closing keynote is Dr. Richard Warren, Jr. He is the 2019 Maryland State Teacher of the Year and a nationally awarded STEM innovator. Samsung named him one of the leading Solve for Tomorrow teachers in the United States. He has nearly a decade of teaching experience and holds a Bachelor's of Science, Master's in Teaching, and Doctorate in Education Leadership from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. In February 2019, Richards was inducted to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore Hall of Excellence, the highest honor of achievement offered by his university. He is an expert in teacher retention, where he has compiled, written, and published over 150 pages of literature and recommendations to school districts that are implementing mentoring programs for beginning teachers. Since 2015, he has worked closely with school district teacher mentoring programs, helping beginning teachers find success and gratification in the classroom. Dr. Warren currently serves as the Hazel Professor of Education at the University of Maryland, preparing future teachers to take on the next generation of students, with a special emphasis on educating male students of color to become K-12 teachers. He is also deeply engaged in NNSTOY's Teach for Equity project. Without further ado, an absolute warm welcome to Dr. Richard Warren.
Thank you, Bob. I am incredibly excited to be here. Thank you, NNSTOY, NEA, and all of the leaders who are involved, whether on the front end or on the back end, whether on the scene or behind the scenes. I'm very appreciative of this work that you have done to make this conference possible. So, greetings, everybody, leaders, educators, NNSTOY, and everyone who's engaging or who has engaged in this conference. I am incredibly excited to talk to you from the topic of slaying the giant with pebbles, the transformational power of equitable actions. It's time to slay. Slaying the giant with pebbles. So on June 3rd, 2020, that's a date that I'll never forget. I actually remember watching my mother through a glass wall take some of her last breaths as she passed away from COVID-19 pneumonia. And as you can imagine, this was a time filled with a tremendous amount of emotions, an indescribable hurt, intense heartache, an immense amount of tears flowing from the depths of my being, having to watch my mother through a glass wall. But it was also a time for great reflection because my mother was my best teacher. And as I began to think about all the lessons and sticky statements that she would say to me as a little black boy, I'll never forget this one thing that she would say to me that I believe can apply to us as educators and leaders. Whenever I felt like a challenge was too big or I couldn't wrap my mind around a comprehensive solution, my mother will always say, "Son, all you need is a pebble to knock down the giant, because little becomes much in the right hands." A pebble, something small, intricate, can knock down a giant, something large and powerful. And if we think about this in the realm of education, we face and have faced some giants of inequity. Giants such as inequities when it comes to school discipline and our black boys getting disciplined more and at higher rates than any other group. Giants when it comes to disparities in graduation rates between Alaskan Indians. Giants when it comes to access to AP courses among different populations. Giants when it comes to equitable access for teachers in low poverty versus high poverty schools. These are just a few of many of the giants that exist in terms of inequity in the United States education system. But I'm here today with the message to tell you that we can begin to slay these giants with pebbles. Small, intricate, equitable actions that are highly important, but often underemphasized. I want you to meet Latier. Latier is a student who I taught in the 8th grade. And I remember a particular lesson that I was teaching about heat transfer. And I showed the video to the class, and one of the actors randomly said, "Heat is hot." And Latier shouted out amongst the class, "What in the world? Of course heat is hot. Obviously, what kind of teaching is this, Dr. Warren?" And all of our classmates started yelling and screaming and laughing. And we couldn't hear the video anymore. And in that moment, I had two ways in which I could respond. Number one, I could reprimand Latier. I could discipline her for shouting out and causing a disruption in the class. Or number two, I could appreciate her voice and utilize it to enhance the lesson. And so immediately I said, "Latier, heat is hot, right?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "That sounds like a title of a song." She said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, we should make a song out of that called Heat is Hot." She said, "Okay, let's do it." And so I found the instrumental and I put on the instrumental and I began to write lyrics about radiation, convection, and conduction. And I tagged the song Heat is Hot. And it goes, "Heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot. I'm sweating. Heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot, heat is hot. I'm sweating." And then the rap portion says, "I be teaching about science in the class and in the streets. I ain't talking about D-Wade or Chris Bosh. I'm talking heat. We know that heat rises from the bottom to the top. Yeah, we saw that video, so we know that heat is hot, hot. Hotter than the fire, hotter than the flame. It's 6th period science class. We don't play no games. We all about learning. We all up in this lesson. It's 3 types of heat transfer: radiation, convection, and conduction." Yeah, I got bars. Don't believe me? Ask Mar, ask Latier, ask Chloe, Mr. Warren. Going hard, going ham, going dumb. Radiation is like the sun. Conduction, if you touch it. Convection like water in your oven. Heat is hot. 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 I'm sweating. And so before you know it, the entire class was standing up. They were rapping the lyrics. They were learning about heat transfer, and they were engaged in ways that I would never even imagine. And I immediately began to realize that equity is about meeting students' needs and finding the beauty in those discretionary moments. And I'm pleased to announce that that was 8 years ago. And Latier graduated. And now she's a teacher. And I had the honor of teaching with Latier this summer. And she told me to tell you that something special happens when you create environments for students to feel comfortable, to share ideas, regardless of the accuracy. She told me to tell you that it's great when students can feel comfortable as their authentic self without feeling like they have to code switch. She told me that she felt comfortable in my class because she didn't feel like she had to be perfect to keep up with her counterparts, and that it was okay to be her. Pebbles. And she told me to tell you that equity in education means tweaking the dinner recipe so that each child are academically fed and are successful in completing their class. Pebbles. I want you to meet Mr. Knott, an aspiring educator that I met this year. He drives over an hour just to get to school every day. He's the only black male figure at his school. And in many cases, he's the only black male teacher that students see in the building. This comes with an invisible tax that weighs on him in this work. Fortunately, I had the chance to co-teach with Mr. Knock and in a summer program actually that recruits students of color. Simply by being in the same space and sharing similar cultural experiences and affirming his humanity helps show him that we are important and that we matter, and that equity and diversity strengthens schools and helps improve the teaching workforce. And I'm pleased to announce that this year, Mr. Knock has his own classroom and he is working towards full teacher certification. And he told me to tell you that as a black man, it is hard to work in a field that is not dominated by your race or gender, and that schools and community members have to be more welcoming, and that we all have a story below our skin, some very similar, some very different. But one thing we have in common is that we showed up, all of us, Pebbles. And lastly, I want you to meet the younger version of me, Little Richard. I was just 15 years old, but at this point, I had already experienced a lot of trauma. Parents divorced. I moved to 6 different school districts in less than a 2-year span. Had to bury one of my closest friends who was shot and killed at 13 years old. I lived in a high poverty area, high crime, food desert. And for many teachers, I was a student who they didn't want. I was a student who most would write up, suspend, and who would label as a problem child. And so I spent my early years of high school disengaged, disconnected. But I'll never forget, I had a teacher, her name was Mrs. Heidi, and I share this story a lot. One day after class, she let me sleep and she woke me up when all the kids left. She tapped me on my shoulders and she did something for me that no other teacher had done for me before. She said, "Young man, what's wrong? Is there anything I can do to support and help you?" A simple question. And I began to share with her all the things that I've been through. She put her hand on my shoulders and she looked me in the eyes. She said, "Young man, I refuse to let you live below your potential." She said, "Don't let your situations determine how you will live. You have to live to determine your situations." And she told me that she would help me, she would tutor me and mentor me. And she did. Every day. She would make sure that I did what I needed to do and supported me. And she helped me to graduate with a good enough GPA to get into college. You see, what Mrs. Heidi did for me in that moment was that she validated my humanity without highlighting my weaknesses. And she saw me as more than just as a human doing. She saw me as a human being. Pebbles. You see, my story, Latier's story, Mr. Knox's stories, speaks to the transformational power that equitable actions can have on a child's life. And it captures the very essence of why equity matters and why we must continue to slay the giants of inequity that exist in education, one pebble at a time. As educators, we have the grave responsibility to educate the whole self, to see, hear, feel, name, and critique normalized practices that don't work for all students or teachers, to develop in discretionary moments where you have less than 2 minutes to make a decision that can impact a child's development, to re-examine our inequitable habits and flip it on its heads, where we can begin to, instead of accusing kids, we can affirm kids. Instead of victimizing, we can validate them. Instead of bashing, we can find the beauty in every human being. Pebbles. Small, intricate steps that can slay the giant. And I believe we were all given a wealth of knowledge through this conference. And so I asked you, what small, intricate steps will you take? What pebble of practice will you take on Monday? One of the things that I was able to do across my journey was to go back to my high school. And I began to speak to the kids about my journey and how education is super important. And I was looking for Mrs. Heidi and I couldn't find her. I tried to send her email, text message, email, phone call, etc., and I couldn't find her. But when I got done speaking to the kids, I felt a light tap on my shoulder. And it was Mrs. Heidi. I looked her in the eyes and she looked me in the eyes and I started crying and she started crying. And I gave her the biggest hug that I could. And I told her, thank you for finding the beauty in a lost 15-year-old boy. Again, what pebbles will you take to slay the giant? How will you harness the transformational power of equitable actions for your students, for each other, and for ourselves? Because little becomes much in the right hands. Slay the giant. Thank you.
Yeah. Richard, thank you. Thank you so much for that inspiring and amazing message. And thank you for giving us so many pebbles. I will say, I know you make Miss Heidi proud, your mom proud, NSTOY proud, every teacher leader in this country proud. And I think we all have so much work to do to be what you described, validating humanity without defining students by their weakness, stepping from, even when we try really hard, sometimes we can lean towards accusing instead of affirming. And I think this Teach for Equity work that NSTOY is engaged in is going to help build a framework or a model to help us do that. But thank you so much for your words of wisdom, of inspiration, and thank you for giving all of us so many pebbles today.
Thank you, Bob. I'm incredibly honored and appreciative to share this space and to elevate teacher and student voices.
Thank you. Well, today, once again, thanks to Dr. Richard Warren for the closing keynote. And today would not be possible without our incredible sponsors that have stepped forward to amplify the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, NSTOY's commitment to equity. Once again, I want to thank the sponsors that have helped make today possible. The NEA Foundation, Curriculum Associates, ETS, and of course, our title sponsor, the National Education Association, NEA. We are at the close of our convening, our national convening. You will receive a certificate of attendance in your email in approximately a week, and you'll receive a link to the recordings of all the sessions and keynotes. So you can see all the breakouts, you can see everything. And in closing, thank you for joining us today. You're going to receive links to all 6 amazing breakout sessions, all the keynotes you heard today, and the panel discussion. You'll receive NSTOY's curated resource guide. And I just want to say, on behalf of the NSTOY Board of Directors, a special thanks to everyone who helped make today possible and to everyone that joined us. Please continue to connect with NSTOY and join us as we work to improve policy, practice, and advocacy with an overall emphasis on equity. Thank you for joining us in this work, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.